The wrench slipped from Jake Morrison's oil-stained fingers as the night sky erupted in streaks of burning metal. He'd been working on his generator behind the cabin when what looked like a meteor shower suddenly changed direction, defying every law of physics he'd learned in his 32 years. The largest object, easily the size of a small aircraft, crashed into the pine forest half a mile from his property with a sound like thunder splitting the earth. Jake grabbed his flashlight and rifle, more out of habit than hostility. Living off-grid in the Montana wilderness taught you to be prepared for anything, but nothing had prepared him for this. The trek through the dense forest took 20 minutes, following a trail of splintered trees and scorched earth. The smell hit him first, ozone and something metallic like copper pennies left in the rain. Then he saw it, a sleek, organic-looking craft embedded in a crater of its own making, its hull still glowing with residual heat. Jake approached cautiously, his rifle lowered but ready. The vessel's surface seemed to ripple in the flashlight beam like liquid mercury frozen mid-flow. As he circled the wreckage, searching for any sign of, what? Survivors? Pilots? Aliens? A section of the hull suddenly dissolved, revealing a dark interior. She emerged like something from a fever dream. Humanoid but clearly not human, she stood nearly 6 feet tall with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Her hair was white as fresh snow, flowing past her shoulders and her eyes. Her eyes were the deep violet of twilight skies. She wore what looked like a form-fitting bodysuit that had seen better days, torn and stained with something that might have been blood. When she saw Jake, she stumbled, pressing one elegant hand against her side where dark fluid seeped between her fingers. She spoke, but the words were like wind chimes in a storm, beautiful but incomprehensible. "Easy there," Jake said, setting his rifle aside and raising his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." She tilted her head, studying him with those remarkable eyes. Then something extraordinary happened. He felt a gentle presence brush against his mind, tentative as a butterfly landing on his shoulder. "Help. Please." The words appeared in his thoughts, not his ears. Jake's rational mind screamed that this was impossible, that he should run, call someone, do anything but stand here having a telepathic conversation with a bleeding alien woman. But something deeper, call it instinct or stupidity, made him step forward. "You're hurt," he said aloud, pointing to her wound. "Let me help." She nodded, and as she did, images flashed through his mind. Vast cities under alien stars, a plague that spread not through bodies but through genetic codes. Billions of her people dying as their ability to reproduce simply stopped. And finally, a desperate journey to a small blue planet where hope might still exist. Jake caught her as she collapsed, her weight surprisingly light in his arms. Up close he could see the exhaustion etched in her features, the way her breathing came in shallow gasps. Whatever had brought her here, she was at the end of her strength. "My cabin's not far," he murmured, lifting her carefully. "We'll get you patched up, figure out what comes next." As he carried her through the forest, Jake Morrison, mechanic hermit man who'd chosen solitude over the complexities of human civilization, had no idea he was carrying the future of 2 species in his arms. All he knew was that someone needed help, and he'd never been able to walk away from that. Behind them, the alien craft's hull completed its dissolution, leaving nothing but a crater and the scent of ozone to mark humanity's first contact with the stars. Jake's cabin had never felt smaller. The alien woman, Vayara, she'd told him through that strange mental touch, lay on his couch, her wound cleaned and bandaged with his first aid supplies. The bleeding had stopped, but her pale blue skin held an alarming gray undertone. "Your medical knowledge is adequate," she said, the words forming directly in his mind while her lips remained still. Her physical voice, when she chose to use it, carried an accent he couldn't place, melodic, with consonants that seemed to flow like water. "Wilderness first aid," Jake replied, settling into his armchair across from her. "Had to learn when the nearest hospital is 2 hours away." He gestured to the simple cabin around them. Not exactly equipped for alien physiology, A ghost of a smile crossed her features. Alien. Yes, I suppose I am. She struggled to sit up, and Jake moved to help her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. The moment their skin touched, the telepathic connection deepened. Images flooded his mind. Her homeworld, Alaris Prime, with its crystalline cities and floating gardens, the Alari people tall and graceful, their society built on telepathic bonds so deep that privacy was a foreign concept. Then came the darkness, the genetic plague that swept through their population like wildfire, rendering them sterile one by one. We called it the Silent Death, Vayara explained, her mental voice heavy with grief. It targeted our reproductive systems with surgical precision. Within 50 years, births ceased entirely. She paused, her violet eyes meeting his. I am the last. Jake felt the weight of that revelation settle over him like a lead blanket. The last fertile female of your entire species? The last female, period. She looked away. The others died as their hope faded. I remained because I had to, because our scientists discovered something remarkable in the genetic databases of the Galactic Alliance. She stood slowly, moving to the window where dawn was beginning to paint the Montana sky in shades of gold and pink. Humans are genetically compatible with my people. Not all humans, the match has to be precise, almost impossibly so. Our computer models identified perhaps a dozen individuals on your entire planet. Jake's mouth went dry. And you, Jake Morrison, are one of them. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Jake stared at her back, at the way her white hair caught the morning light, and tried to process what she was telling him. That's impossible, he said finally. I'm just a mechanic. I fix engines and live alone because I prefer it that way. I'm nobody special. Vayara turned back to him, and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't noticed before. Desperation mixed with something that might have been hope. Your genetic markers are extraordinary, a combination of recessive traits that appears in less than 1 in 10 million humans. You carry DNA sequences that mirror our own reproductive pathways. She moved closer, and Jake caught her scent. Something like jasmine mixed with ozone. I came to Earth to find you, Jake. To ask you to help me, save my people. Help you how? But even as he asked, he knew the answer. By becoming the father of a new hybrid race, our children would carry the best of both species, human adaptability and Alari telepathic abilities. They could repopulate our world, or find a new one. Jake stood abruptly, pacing to the far side of the small room. You're talking about breeding, like some kind of stud service? No. Vayara's voice was sharp, both mental and physical. I'm talking about love. The word stopped him cold. She continued, her mental voice soft now, intimate. Among my people, reproduction requires more than physical compatibility. It requires a deep emotional and telepathic bond. The connection I felt when I first touched your mind, it was unlike anything I'd experienced. Not just genetic compatibility, but true resonance. As if to prove her point, she approached him slowly, her hand extended. May I? Jake hesitated, then took her hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, the connection exploded between them. Not just thoughts now, but emotions. Her loneliness, her desperate hope, her growing attraction to this human who'd saved her without question. And his own feelings, which he'd been trying to ignore. Fascination, protectiveness, and something deeper stirring in his chest. I feel it too, he whispered aloud. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see flecks of silver in her violet eyes. Then you understand why I chose you. Not just for your genetics, but for this. She pressed his hand to her chest, over her heart. For the way you make me feel less alone. Their first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered. Her lips were softer than he'd expected, and she tasted like starlight and possibility. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Jake, she whispered, and his name on her lips sounded like a prayer. The sound of engines in the distance shattered the moment. Multiple vehicles, approaching fast from the direction of the main road. "They found me," Vayara said, her face going pale. "Nexus Corporation. They've been tracking my ship's energy signature." Jake grabbed his rifle and a go bag he kept ready by the door. "Then we run." The abandoned mining facility nestled in the Glacier National Park backcountry had been Jake's emergency refuge for 3 years, stocked with supplies and hidden from satellite surveillance by the mountain's natural ore deposits. For 2 days, he and Vayara had remained undetected, but the isolation was doing things to them both. "Your thoughts are louder when you're afraid," Vayara observed, sitting cross-legged on the makeshift bed Jake had assembled from camping gear. The telepathic bond between them had strengthened with proximity and stress, creating an intimacy that went beyond words. Jake looked up from the radio equipment he'd been trying to repair. "Can you turn it off? The mind-reading thing? Would you ask someone to stop breathing?" She tilted her head, studying him with those violet eyes that seemed to see straight through his defenses. "Besides, you're not afraid of me anymore. You're afraid of what you're feeling." She was right. The attraction between them had grown from a spark to a flame that threatened to consume his carefully ordered world. Every accidental touch sent electricity through his nervous system. Every shared glance carried weight that made his chest tight. "My people don't engage in casual physical relationships," Vayara continued, rising gracefully and approaching where he knelt by the radio. "For us, intimacy and reproduction are inseparable from deep emotional bonding. The telepathic connection makes pretense impossible." Jake's hands stilled on the radio components. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that what I feel when I look at you, what we both feel, it's real. Not just biological compatibility or desperation." She knelt beside him close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Among my people, we would call this Korvash, the deep bonding that leads to lifelong partnership." Before he could respond, her hand touched his cheek and the mental connection opened fully between them. Jake gasped as her emotions flooded through him, loneliness that stretched back centuries, the weight of being the last of her kind, and, underneath it all, a growing love that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Vayara," he whispered, covering her hand with his own. "I know this is overwhelming for you," she said, both aloud and in his mind. "Your people approach these connections differently. But I need you to understand, if we do this, if we create new life together, it won't be merely biological. For my kind, it requires the complete joining of hearts and minds." Jake turned to face her fully, seeing his own reflection in her eyes. A rough-edged human man who'd found something he never knew he was searching for. "And if I'm ready for that?" Her smile was radiant. "Then show me." Their second kiss was nothing like the first. Where that had been tentative, this was hungry, desperate. Two people who'd found each other at the edge of the world. Jake's hands tangled in her silver-white hair while her fingers traced the lines of his face as if memorizing them. When she began to remove her torn bodysuit, Jake caught her hands. "Are you sure? Once we cross this line?" "There is no line to cross," she replied, her mental voice warm with affection and desire. "There is only us, and the future we choose to create." What followed was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Vayara's alien physiology was both familiar and wonderfully different, her skin slightly cooler than human, with an opalescent quality that seemed to glow in the dim light of the mining facility. But it was the telepathic connection that transformed everything. As their bodies joined, so did their minds. Jake felt every sensation doubled, his own pleasure and hers, creating a feedback loop that built to heights he'd never imagined possible. Through the connection, he experienced her wonder at human passion, the way their emotional resonance amplified every touch, every kiss. "Korvash," she whispered against his ear as they moved together, and he understood now that it meant more than bonding. It meant becoming two halves of a greater whole. Afterward, they lay entwined on the narrow bed, Jake tracing patterns on Vayara's luminescent skin while she rested her head on his chest. I can feel the change beginning, she said softly, her hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. The genetic compatibility you carry, it's awakening something in me that's been dormant since the plague. You mean? It's too early to be certain, but yes. I believe we've succeeded in creating new life. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw joy mixed with fear. Our child will be the first of a new species, neither fully human nor Alari, but something entirely new. Jake pulled her closer, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. What happens now? Before she could answer, the sound of aircraft overhead made them both freeze. Multiple helicopters flying in formation and getting closer. Nexus Corporation, Vieira said, sitting up quickly. They must have expanded their search grid. Jake was already moving, grabbing weapons and supplies. There's another way out through the old mine shafts, but we have to move now. As they gathered their gear, Vieira suddenly stiffened, her hand flying to her temple. No, she whispered. Not just Nexus, my people, the purest faction. Commander Thane has arrived on Earth. Who's Commander Thane? Vieira's face had gone pale with fear. The leader of those who believe the Alari should die pure rather than live as hybrids. He'll kill us both rather than let our child be born. The sound of boots on metal echoed through the facility's entrance tunnels. Jake shouldered his rifle and took Vieira's hand. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. They ran deeper into the mountain, with the future of 2 species growing in Vieira's womb and the forces of 3 different factions closing in around them. Behind them, the abandoned mining facility filled with armed figures who would stop at nothing to claim or destroy the galaxy's last hope. The Nexus Corporation facility looked like a black glass monument to corporate power, rising from the Montana plains like a technological obelisk. Jake stared at it through binoculars from their hiding spot in the hills, his jaw clenched with fury and desperation. 48 hours, he muttered. They've had her for 48 hours. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Nexus geneticist who'd made contact with Jake after witnessing Vieira's capture, adjusted her own binoculars. The good news is they're keeping her alive. CEO Harrison wants to study the pregnancy before making any permanent decisions. Jake's hands tightened on the rifle. The pregnancy, confirmed now by Nexus's medical scans, had become the prize in a 3-way war. Nexus wanted to control and commercialize it. The Alari purists, led by Commander Thane, wanted to destroy it. And Jake just wanted Vieira back. What about Thane's forces? Jake asked. Still in orbit, but our satellites detected a shuttle launched 2 hours ago. He's coming planetside. Elena's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much in the past 2 days. Jake, you need to understand what you're walking into. Harrison doesn't just want to study Vieira. He wants to turn her into a breeding factory, create dozens of hybrid children for military applications. The thought made Jake's stomach turn. Through their bond, weakened by distance but still present, he could feel Vieira's emotional state. Fear, anger, and underneath it all, a fierce protectiveness for the life growing inside her. The service tunnels you showed me, they'll get me inside? Elena nodded. But once you're in there, you're on your own. I can't help you further without exposing myself. She handed him a security card. This will get you to sublevel 3, where they're holding her. After that, I improvise. Jake checked his weapons one final time. If I don't make it out, you will, Elena interrupted. You have to. That child represents hope for both our species. The infiltration took 3 hours of crawling, through maintenance tunnels and service corridors. Jake's military training from his younger days came flooding back. How to move silently, how to avoid security cameras, how to become invisible in plain sight. But nothing had prepared him for the rage that built in his chest as he got closer to Vieira. He found her in what Nexus euphemistically called a medical observation suite, essentially a high-tech prison cell with monitoring equipment. She lay on a hospital bed, her wrists secured with restraints, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed as they recorded every aspect of her physiology. Jake, she whispered as he picked the electronic lock. her mental voice flooding his mind with relief and love. "I knew you'd come. Always," he replied, cutting through her restraints with a knife. "Are you hurt? The baby?" "We're both fine. But Jake—" Her eyes widened in alarm. "It's a trap. They knew you'd come." The lights flashed on, revealing CEO Harrison flanked by a dozen security guards. The corporate executive was younger than Jake had expected, with the kind of predatory smile that belonged in a boardroom rather than a laboratory. "Mr. Morrison," Harrison said, his voice smooth as silk. "Thank you for making this so easy. We've been monitoring your girlfriend's telepathic emissions. Every time she reached out to you, we tracked the connection." Jake's rifle was already in his hands, but 12 weapons trained on him made resistance futile. "Let her go. This is between you and me." "Oh, but it's so much bigger than that." Harrison approached Vayara's bed, his eyes fixed on her with scientific fascination. "Do you have any idea what you've created? The first human-alien hybrid in recorded history? The military applications alone are worth billions." "You're talking about our child," Vayara said, her voice carrying dangerous undertones. "I'm talking about the future of human evolution. Telepathic soldiers, enhanced intelligence, genetic modifications that could make us the dominant species in the galaxy." Harrison's smile widened. "And you, my dear, are going to help us create an army of them." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Jake felt Vayara's rage building through their bond, and with it, something else. A power he'd never sensed before. "You will not touch my child," Vayara said, and every piece of electronic equipment in the room began to flicker. Harrison frowned. "Interesting. The emotional stress seems to be amplifying her telepathic abilities. Make a note of that, for—" His words were cut off as every screen in the facility went black. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Through the chaos, Jake heard Vayara's mental voice, clear and urgent. "Now, Jake." While they're distracted, Jake moved with desperate efficiency, using the confusion to disarm the nearest guard and create cover behind an overturned medical cart. Gunfire erupted, but Vayara's telepathic assault on the facility's systems had thrown the security forces into disarray. "The child will be extraordinary," Vayara said, her voice carrying impossible calm as she stood from the bed. "But it will never be your weapon." She touched her hand to the wall, and Jake felt the building's entire electrical grid respond to her will. Lights died, security doors malfunctioned, and in the distance, alarms began to wail. "Time to go," Jake said, taking her hand. They ran through corridors filled with emergency lighting and confused personnel, Vayara's expanded abilities clearing their path by disabling security systems ahead of them. But as they reached the exit, Jake's blood turned to ice. Commander Thane stood waiting in the parking lot, flanked by a dozen Alari warriors in ceremonial battle armor. The alien commander was tall even by Alari standards, his pale blue skin marked with ritual scars, his eyes like chips of winter sky. "Vayara of the 7th House," Thane said, his telepathic voice reaching both their minds. "You have committed the ultimate betrayal of our people." "I have saved our people," Vayara replied, moving protectively in front of Jake. "Our child will carry the best of both species forward. Our child will be an abomination." Thane drew a weapon that hummed with alien energy. "The Alari will die pure, or not at all." Jake stepped beside Vayara, his rifle trained on the alien. "Commander." "Over my dead body." Thane's laugh was like breaking glass. "That was always the plan, human." The standoff stretched for heartbeats that felt like hours. Behind them, Nexus security forces were regrouping. Ahead, the Alari purists blocked their escape. Jake felt Vayara's hand find his, their fingers intertwining as they faced impossible odds together. "Whatever happens," she whispered in his mind, "know that I love you. Both of you." "I love you too," Jake replied. "All three of us." And in that moment, as hostile forces closed in from all sides, Jake Morrison made his choice. Not just to fight for the woman he loved, but to fight for the future they'd created together. A future that represented hope for two dying species, and the birth of something entirely new. The battle for that future was about to begin. The firefight erupted across the Nexus facility parking lot like a war between worlds. Jake dove behind a concrete barrier, pulling Vayara with him as energy weapons from Thane's forces answered the gunfire from Nexus security. Caught in the crossfire, Jake realized that both factions would rather see them dead than let their child represent a future neither could control. "Can you still affect their electronics?" Jake shouted over the chaos. Vayara's hand pressed against her stomach, her face pale with strain. "The pregnancy is amplifying my abilities, but it's also draining me. I can't maintain it much longer." A brilliant flash lit the night as one of Thane's warriors fell to Nexus plasma fire. The Alari commander roared orders in his native language, his forces advancing with deadly precision. Harrison's security team was outgunned and outmatched, but they had numbers and defensive positions. "They're going to tear each other apart," Jake muttered, then looked at Vayara with sudden inspiration. "And we're going to let them." He kissed her quickly, fiercely. "Trust me." Jake sprinted from cover, not toward either faction but to the abandoned Nexus personnel shuttle sitting on the landing pad. Bullets and energy beams seared the air around him as both sides tried to bring him down, but his destination wasn't the shuttle itself. It was the communications array mounted on its roof. "Elena," he shouted into his radio as he reached the shuttle. "If you can hear this, now would be a good time for that favor you owe me." The response came through his earpiece 30 seconds later. "Jake, what the hell are you—" "The emergency beacon in my go bag," Jake interrupted, climbing onto the shuttle's roof while gunfire erupted around him. "You said it would bring the cavalry. I need the cavalry now." "That beacon calls in a federal response team, Jake. Full military." "Good." Jake ripped open the communications array, his mechanics knowledge letting him jury-rig the shuttle's transmitter to amplify his emergency beacon's signal. "Because we need someone bigger than corporate security and alien fanatics." The first military helicopters appeared on the horizon just as Thane himself strode across the battlefield toward Vayara's position. The Alari commander moved through the crossfire like death incarnate, his ceremonial armor deflecting both human bullets and alien energy weapons. "Vayara!" Jake shouted, leaping down from the shuttle. She was trying to stand, one hand pressed, against a concrete barrier for support, the other protecting her stomach. The strain of the fight and her expanding telepathic abilities was taking its toll. Thane raised his energy weapon, its barrel glowing with lethal charge. "The corruption ends here." "No," Vayara said, and her voice carried power that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "The future begins here." The telepathic pulse that erupted from her mind was unlike anything Jake had felt before. It wasn't just communication. It was raw emotion, broadcast with enough force to reach every thinking being within miles. Hope, love, the fierce protectiveness of a mother for her unborn child, the desperate need for her people to survive, not as they were, but as they could become. Thane staggered, his weapon wavering as the emotional storm hit him. Around the battlefield, both Nexus personnel and Alari warriors paused, overwhelmed by the intensity of what Vayara was projecting. The military helicopters touched down, disgorging federal agents and soldiers who quickly established a perimeter around the entire facility. Through his earpiece, Jake heard Elena's voice. "Colonel Martinez, this is Dr. Vasquez. We have a first contact situation here. Multiple alien combatants and corporate forces engaged in unauthorized warfare on U.S. soil. Stand down." Colonel Martinez's amplified voice boomed across the parking lot. "All combatants, drop your weapons. This area is now under federal jurisdiction." Harrison tried to retreat into his facility, but federal agents were already moving to secure all entrances. Thane's warriors looked to their commander, who stood frozen, still reeling from Vayara's telepathic assault. Jake reached Vayara just as she collapsed, catching her in his arms. "The baby?" he asked urgently. "Safe," she whispered, both aloud and in his mind. "Strong. I can feel—" "Jake, I can feel the genetic sequences stabilizing. The hybrid characteristics are developing perfectly." Around them, the standoff continued, but the arrival of federal forces had changed the dynamic completely. This was no longer a corporate extraction or alien vendetta. It was a diplomatic incident of unprecedented magnitude. "Commander Thane," Vayara called out, her voice carrying despite her exhaustion. "You felt what I projected. You know the truth. Now, this child isn't an abomination. It's hope." The Alari commander slowly lowered his weapon, his scarred face conflicted. Through the telepathic connection Jake shared with Vayara, he caught fragments of Thane's thoughts, memories of his own children, lost to the plague, and the desperate loneliness of a species facing extinction. "The Alari Council will not accept this," Thane said finally. "Then the Alari Council will die alone," Vayara replied. "But those who choose to live will find a new way forward." Colonel Martinez approached cautiously, his weapon lowered but ready. "I'm going to need everyone to start explaining what the hell is going on here." Slowly and with no sudden movements. 6 months later, the protected facility in the Colorado Rockies looked nothing like a prison, despite the security measures surrounding it. Jake stood on the balcony of their quarters, watching Vayara tend to the garden she'd planted in the facility's courtyard. Her pregnancy was showing now, and the morning sun made her opalescent skin glow with an inner light that still took his breath away. The latest genetic scans came back, Dr. Elena Vasquez said, joining him on the balcony. She'd become the lead scientist on what the government was calling the Hybrid Integration Project. "Your daughter is developing beautifully. Human bone structure, Alari neural pathways, and some genetic combinations we've never seen before. Daughter?" Jake smiled. Vayara suspected, but we wanted to be sure. "Definitely a girl. And Jake?" Elena's voice carried wonder. "Her brain activity is unlike anything we've recorded. She's going to be extraordinary." Below in the courtyard, Vayara looked up and waved, her mental voice warm in Jake's mind. "She's excited. She knows we're talking about her." "Already telepathic?" Elena asked, seeing Jake's expression. "Getting stronger every day." Jake's hand moved unconsciously to rest on the railing. "What about the political situation?" Elena's smile faded. "Complicated. The Alari government is split. Half want to exile Vayara permanently, half are quietly interested in the hybrid program. Nexus Corporation is facing federal charges, but Harrison's lawyers are arguing that alien reproduction falls outside human legal jurisdiction. And Thane? Still in custody, but he's been cooperative. I think Vayara's telepathic broadcast affected him more than he wants to admit. He's been asking to speak with her." Jake nodded. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of medical examinations, legal proceedings, and diplomatic negotiations. But through it all, his bond with Vayara had only grown stronger. Their love had become the foundation for something larger, a bridge between two species and hope for futures neither could achieve alone. "Jake," Vayara's voice called from the courtyard. "Come feel this." He made his way down to the garden where Vayara sat on a stone bench, her hands resting on her rounded belly. When Jake placed his palm beside hers, he felt it, a tiny flutter of movement, and with it, the faintest whisper of consciousness touching his mind. "Hello, Daddy," came a voice so small and new it was like hearing starlight. Tears blurred Jake's vision as he kissed Vayara's forehead. "Hello, sweetheart." "She's going to change everything," Vayara said, leaning against him. "Our daughter will be the first of a new people, neither human nor Alari, but something better than either of us alone." Jake wrapped his arms around his family, looking out at the mountains that surrounded their sanctuary. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but full of possibility. He'd started as a simple mechanic living off the grid, wanting nothing more than solitude and simplicity. Now he was the father of a new species, partner to the last Alari, and guardian of a hope that could reshape the galaxy. "Are you ready for this?" Vayara asked, her mental voice tinged with love and anticipation. Jake Morrison, who'd never thought himself destined for anything greater than fixing broken machines, smiled as he felt his daughter's consciousness brush against his mind again. "With you, I'm ready for anything." In the distance, another shuttle was landing, more Alari representatives, drawn by curiosity and hope to see what the future might hold. The hybrid child growing in Veyara's womb had already begun to change the galaxy, one mind at a time. Their story was just beginning. The end.